Hi, Nerida. This week we have the CEO of Mirvac, Susan Lloyd Hurwitz, another major CEO of a major property company, which is a fantastic guest to have on Lead the Way. You have a personal relationship with Susan. You've worked with her throughout your career. What can you tell us about Susan before we get started?
She's been CEO of Mirvac since 2012. I first met her when I interviewed her for a property council event. It was a capital markets summit, and I was interviewing her and 4 other leaders in the property industry. What's interesting is that she is a very strong leader, and Mirvac has been a very, very strong performer over recent years and has performed particularly well through COVID. She's a strong leader, but she's also a very popular leader. So one of the things I'm really interested to talk to her about today is company culture, because when I interviewed her 5 years ago, one of the things that she said was that company culture was just so important to her, which was quite a different tune to a lot of what other people in the property industry were saying at the time. So really looking forward to hearing her views on that.
The people I do know working at Mirvac have worked there for a very long time and are very proud of the fact that they've worked at Mirvac and what they're delivering there. Mirvac have been delivering some incredible projects across different sectors. Just recently in East Melbourne, they delivered Eastbourne, which has been a huge success. They just delivered the older Fleet building on Collins Street, where Deloitte's is a major tenant. And they've really pushed boundaries and reinvigorated office style buildings with that development. And 90 Collins Street's a wonderful asset to have on the east end of the CBD. I was fortunate enough to work for them by getting Cartier to go into that building. And that was the first time luxury moved across the street to the north side. But they're a very entrepreneurial Mirvac, and they worked through every problem as an opportunity and found solutions through it.
And I'm really interested to hear today from Susan about their motto is about reimagining urban life, and really interested to hear whether that has changed in this post-COVID environment. Also, the focus on Melbourne and Sydney. A lot of the projects you just mentioned were Melbourne. They have a very strong footprint in Sydney as well. So, are they looking beyond that boundary? They do have exposure in other markets, but not to the same extent. So, it will be interesting to hear from a leader in the industry as to, what direction that they're looking at going into.
And has COVID changed the way they're planning and developing buildings and projects like it is for Cbus? We had Adrian on a few weeks ago, and they're now looking at a whole new way of delivering offices and retail based on the current market conditions. So we're really privileged to be getting these speakers to tell us from the top what they're doing. Mirvac is of the biggest property companies in Australia, and Susan is of the most powerful CEOs in Australia, particularly female CEOs in Australia. And it's a great privilege. It wasn't a hard decision. Should I not wear a tie today? It was definitely wear a tie today, because people like Susan don't come on often.
No, they don't. I was going to wear a jacket, but it is very hot in Sydney today. So I've got the air conditioning cranked up, and I am, I couldn't quite do a jacket. But yeah, I think a suit is a perfect outfit for this event. Susan, thanks so much for coming on today. We're so thrilled to have you on and talking through your career and how you've been handling the crisis.
Oh, it's a pleasure for asking me.
One of the things that we really want to ask you straight up is, you've been as a CEO of Mirvac since 2012, obviously done such an incredible job with the company. What challenges have you faced during your career that really set you up for this time period?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think anything could possibly set anybody up for this time period. Before we start, I do need to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which is both my virtual background, which is the new public art at South Everleigh, and where I'm sitting at 200 George Street. I pay my respects to elders past and present. So I don't think there's any preparation that anybody could have had to set up for this specific instance. And I've shared this before, but we do a lot of risk scenario planning, and every so often the ELT will get taken through a risk simulation, and somebody will come in and they'll run us through an event, and we have to play act. How would we respond in XYZ event? Now, we never practiced a pandemic. And I will tell you that every time I saw that workshop in my calendar, my heart would sink. And I would think, I really don't want to do this. And then when the real crisis came, I'm so glad we had, because we didn't have to spend any time thinking about what committees to stand up, who was playing what role, how frequently were we going to meet, what decisions did we need to make. It just happened. And it allowed us to make thousands of decisions really quickly in that shock and awe phase at the beginning, that then we stabilized the company really quickly. The other thing, as I reflected on this question, is having a very strong sense of purpose and a way that you need to make decisions when there are no right answers because there's no playbook. All you have are a set of values. And so I think my experiences over the years in crafting what I hold dear as my values became a really important compass. I'll just give you a very quick example about that. We were struggling as an ELT with the question of what to do about remuneration. So the ELT had already taken a 20% pay cut. We were working out what to do with the rest of the organisation. This was at the height of the uncertainty. And we were going round and round and round, and until we landed on the principle of equity, we couldn't get an answer. And as soon as we agreed, the driving principle here is fairness, then the answer was obvious. So I'd say those things I think are preparation as much as there possibly can be. Maybe keep learning how to keep a sense of humour.
Susan, if you managed to get a social distance lunch or a walking coffee, as we started to do here in Melbourne, with the Premier Daniel Andrews, what would some of the feedback and or advice you may give to him during your meeting?
Well, actually, it's very usually one of the great things that's come out of this is a much greater level of collaboration between policymakers, politicians and corporate Australia, particularly for, I would say, liberal flavoured governments where there hasn't been as much interaction in the past. It's been really wonderful to be in meetings with lots of CEOs and policymakers around Australia, testing out what would be the impact of this policy and where are the things that we can't see and what do you think that we should do. And really much better way to run a country, I think, with that really open collaboration. But so I have been in lots of meetings with politicians and senior bureaucrats on those very topics. The first thing I say to Dan Andrews is good job. Know that all politicians are working so hard in thankless task and everybody's made mistakes. New South Wales has made mistakes, but you just can't help but take your hats off to them. People leading Australia through this. I'm very glad I live in Australia.
Yeah, same. One of the things, I don't know if you remember, 5 years ago, I interviewed you at a property council event, and I did my rounds before the interviews. I was like, I'm interviewing all these CEOs, I'm going to make sure I'm well across everything. But I remember one of the things that really came out was, for you, was a focus on culture within Mirvac. And this was 5 years ago. So, obviously culture is just such a big deal. But 5 years ago, it was, people were talking about it, but it wasn't so much commentary as is now. One of the things, obviously, culture is just so important within Mirvac. So do you think that has been one of the factors that has really helped you through this crisis and helped Mirvac achieve some pretty strong performance at a time when no one expects strong performance at all? Absolutely.
It is the foundation of who we are as people, what our character is like, how we work, how we respond to things, how we deal with our customers. It is absolutely foundational. And I think that we've taken Mirvac from having staff engagement of 37% when I joined back in 2012 to now 90%. And that's persisted through this period. We've done pulse checks with our people to find out what do we need to be doing, how connected do people feel, how supported do they feel, how resilient are they. 97% of people say that they're very proud to work for Mirvac through this. But we are drawing down on that deep well of culture, and it is not bottomless. And it cannot be replenished successfully in a remote virtual environment. It's one of the key reasons why workplaces are not dead. Because the longer this goes on, the more people understand what are they missing by not having the physical human interaction with all of its light and shade, which is missing in this format, good as it is. So I think I'm very conscious that we're drawing down on that well of culture, but it is absolutely foundational in getting us through. And I've seen it 100 times a week in people expressing genuine compassion and care for people. give you a great example of that. It actually brought a tear to my eye, I have to admit. I hold all staff calls every week for a while, and then every 2 weeks. And the one call where I had to say, we are taking everybody to 80% of hours. Everybody, no exceptions. No, even if you're working 110%, and many are, this is what we need to do as our contribution to getting through and helping our customers through to the other side. And people could use their leave if they wanted to top up their hours, so that if they needed to keep their pay whole, because many people do with commitments, then they could do that. So as I'm explaining this, somebody types into the chat, I've got a lot of leave. One of my team members has no leave. Can I donate my leave to her? And in that moment of hearing bad news about your own financial situation, here was somebody wanting to give to somebody else. And I've seen that 100 times a week, dealing with our own people, dealing with our customers. I can't tell you the number of emails I've got from customers who I've never met, reaching out to say, thank you for dealing with me compassionately and equitably. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see that kindness, isn't it?
It is. It's the only way through is kindness. This is not the time for winner takes all. It's the time for compassion and kindness to ourselves as well.
Yeah.
That's a nice story. Susan, your reputation is quite big in here in Australia, particularly in the corporate Australian market. One thing that always follows your name is your sense of leadership and your clear direction on leadership. On that topic, though, is that something that you can teach others, or are these traits that people are born with?
I always think there are lots of different ways to be an effective leader, and I found my way to be an effective leader, but it doesn't mean it's the only way to be an effective leader. And I think the best way to teach people how to lead is to demonstrate. This is not a question of words, but a question of action. Because if there was dissonance between my words and my actions, my leadership would be extremely ineffective, because people can smell hypocrisy a mile away and inauthenticity. I think there are lots of things you can teach people about being leaders. When we were on that journey from 37 to 90% staff engagement, the first thing we did was provide all of our people managers with we call them the 5 basics, the basic tools of managing and leading your team. You know, things like right people in the right roles, holding feedback sessions, all the basic things that you should do, but weren't being done consistently across the organization. And to give the message to people managers, it's not enough to be a technical expert and deliver a good what. You have to lead your people, and you have to do that from the very beginning. So there's lots of things that can be taught, but I guess I've got a strong identity as a servant leader, and I'd prefer to demonstrate what I mean rather than preach it.
Mirvac's key aim is to reimagine urban life. So, you've got it up there on your screen. So, great logo. Has your view changed, or has Mirvac's view changed since COVID hit as to what urban life means?
That's really a work in progress, isn't it? It's shifting over time, and we have been scanning our customers constantly throughout this whole period, and what people say and how they think about what they want in an urban environment has definitely shifted. It's gone through phases as we've spent more and more time in this environment. I think in many ways we've stepped on the accelerator in lots of trends that were already happening. We were already along the trend towards retail is not about the value of the mall being the sales that go through that square meter. That was already a trend that was apparent. It's just now turbocharged, that the value of that urban real estate is much more than sales. It's experience, it's customer gathering, it's showcasing, it's last mile distribution, it's a place for people to work, it's a place for people to socialize. It's so much more than sales. That was already in train. That's now just accelerated with some speed. And with respect to the office, definitely have gone through periods of particularly people at the established end of their career, if you want to put it that way, old people, we could probably say that as well, with a nice house and well-established connections. They were telling us, we love this. We could stay in our own boots all day long, and I'm spending more time with my kids, and I don't have the commute, and I'm very productive. This is great. fast forward 6 months, those people are saying, well, it's not quite so great. I'm actually living at work effectively, and there are no boundaries on my life, and there's no ritual of get up, get dressed, go somewhere. And they're realizing the depth of what they're missing, as we were talking about before. And right the way along, young people have said, this is really bad, because how do I get the incidental learning? How do I get the training? How do I observe senior people in a negotiation and learn from that? That is all not happening. And you know, so many of our people live in a share house, and there's 4 people trying to do 4 careers around the kitchen table. Very difficult. So in a long answer to say, we are still very committed to urban future of Australia with an overweight to Sydney and Melbourne, and trying to think intelligently and deeply about what things will change, what things have changed and will stay changed, and what things have changed and will revert. And I don't think that anybody has any answers to that just yet, but it's we've got our listening ears on to try and understand what those trends might be and adjust ourselves accordingly.
One sector of the market that Mirvac has been you and Mirvac have been very quick to get into was build to rent. And, you know, there's still a lot of discussion as to whether it can be viable in Australia, how big the sector can get. What's your view? Do you think we can get to a situation where it is as dominant as it is in the US and other parts of the world, or do you think it'll always remain more of a niche sector for property developers and for owners?
I hope it does get to scale, and it certainly is viable. It's not easy, but it is viable. New South Wales government has done the right thing in reducing land tax by 50%, which is something that we've been suggesting for some time. I think Victoria will follow suit in some fashion, and that does make a difference to the economics. Yeah, but we're getting a yield on cost of 4.5%, which in an environment where an office building is the most recent major trades are around 4.25%, and the amount of capex and downtime in a build to rent is far less than an office. So from a risk adjusted point of view, I think makes eminent sense. And I'm really happy with the progress. We've opened up Live Indigo at Sydney Olympic Park, and we have been pleasantly surprised by where demand is coming from. We thought it'd be very local, but we've got people downsizing from the Central Coast, people from Randwick, Bondi. We've never marketed in those areas. They have found us. And the customer proposition of no bond, bring your pet, stay as long as you like, paint the wall. In fact, we'll paint it for you, put a picture on the wall, and if something breaks, there's on-site maintenance that day. That is crystal clear to customers. And the proof of people being willing to pay for it is that Sydney Olympic Park, as you might know, is 4 towers. 2 of them were built to sell. So we've got investor customers in there who are renting out via our Res by Mirvac, which is our service offering for our investor customers. And then we've got the 2 build to rent towers. So exact same location, exact same Mirvac quality. We are getting 20% higher rents in build to rent compared to build to sell. And that is the value that people are putting on that customer proposition. Which is not to say that build to sell investors is an inferior product, just a different product. Now, you are paying for, people are willing to pay for the customer proposition and the service that comes with build to rent. And we are, so far, I'm touching wood, slightly ahead on our underwrite as far as rents go. So far, so good.
Yeah, well done.
Mirvac, as you said, have a weight towards Melbourne and Sydney. Also mostly towards residential and commercial office space, if that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. During this period in 2020, has that readjusted your strategy going into the next 3 years for those asset classes and those locations?
I think, as we said in our results this year, we will have an increased focus on mixed use, genuine mixed use, which is what I think our urban environments need, and particularly in this environment, the ability to work, play, shop, live in one location is very appealing to people. So we'll have more capital allocated to genuine transformative mixed use. We have got a lot more capital that we're allocating to industrial, where that's on turbocharge with all of the e-commerce requirements and data center requirements, so that more capital going into that. We've just achieved rezonings, very significant land holdings out at Badgerys and Kemps Creek in Sydney. So that's where more capital will go. Our master plan community business is the beneficiary of some of the stimulus that governments have put in place, and it's performing at decade highs in terms of amount of sales. Even in Melbourne, there's very strange people buying house and land packages virtually. It surprised me. And we're just about to get ready to launch Green Square in Sydney, and we have started a whisper marketing campaign, and we already have a significant number of expressions of interest ready to start our VIP appointments in a couple of weeks, which is very exciting. And that'll be a real test, I think, of where the apartment market is at.
And location-wise, would you look outside of Melbourne and Sydney going into 2021?
It's a question we are asking ourselves, because our experience over the life of Mirvac is that we really haven't done very well in shallow markets, which can be very good for a period of time, but when the depth of employment isn't there, or there isn't a vibrant university, hospital, training hospital sector, we've done poorly quantitatively on places like that. Is there a hub and spoke argument? Maybe. Now, are we all going to move to Byron Bay? No. So I think maybe we could think about extending. Melbourne might include Geelong, and Sydney might include Wollongong and Newcastle. But I think that we are such an urban specialist that I don't see that changing.
Interesting. And of all your time at Mirvac, which is the one project you're most proud of?
Oh, you can't ask me that. So I ask you which child I prefer.
My daughter.
Which varies on the day. So.
I have 3 sons and a daughter. It's an easy choice for me.
Oh, look, I think I would have to say our build to rent at Sydney Olympic Park, only because people have told us for years we can't do it.
Yeah.
And there's something very satisfying about getting customers to say, yes, you have got this right, that this is something that will make my life better. There's something deeply, deeply satisfying about that.
Your data on build to rent is actually quite fascinating. I mean, there's still not a lot of information out there of how it's performing. So some of those stats you were saying were so interesting. One of the things that has been surprising through this crisis is how well the residential sector has performed. Obviously, you're talking about house and land in Melbourne selling at the moment. It's quite astounding when people are, stuck at home, constrained to a 5K radius. I mean, what's your view on the outlook? I mean, particularly apartments is, the one that I think most people are worried about. What's your view on the outlook for residential?
So on the land and built form business, there's clearly stimulus which is helping, and people are taking advantage of that stimulus. Really doesn't apply in Sydney because of the price point, but we've seen very strong sales in Perth, in Brisbane, in Melbourne. And we've seen a phenomenal increase in traffic to our website, which I think is people not only looking to buy, but people looking for inspiration for renovation, to feed into that. And I think there's some element of pull forward in that. Every time there is stimulus for the first home buyer, it's a pull forward, not a creation of new demand necessarily. And so it will depend, I think, a little on how long stimulus and home builder type grants continue on for. From an apartment point of view, what we're seeing is a complete change in the landscape competitively, with very low approvals for new construction, very low commencement of construction. The competitive field has really shifted. And despite all the disruption of no immigration and so forth, no students, we will see a shortage of quality apartments in Sydney in the very near future. We're already seeing it at Green Square. There's very little competition for that product that we're releasing. So yes, demand is lower, but so is supply. And so I think we should probably withhold judgment on the apartment market until we launch Green Square and also our Channel 9 site at Willoughby, and see what the real demand is from those. So I think that's a wait and see, but we're quietly confident that customers are responding to the expression of interest campaign.
You mentioned it earlier, your Mirvac's views on employees coming back into the office, but if we can just rephrase that question, when do you expect Mirvac's employees to be back in the Melbourne and Sydney office, and what will that office life look like? Will there be major structural changes from what we saw last year?
So let's work backwards through that question. Yes, absolutely, major structural changes, both across the whole office landscape, in the sense that older style space that can't be repurposed to what corporates expect well, this was a trend we were on before, but I think there'll be a real bifurcation between modern office space that can adapt and can provide healthy, touchless environments, all the smart technology you need, and ones that can't. And there's a significant chunk of Sydney and Melbourne's office market, which are 30 years old plus. So that is going to be a structural trend, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years. And then inside the buildings, we've got a working group at the moment across the business of a whole range of different people, as diverse as we could get, to say, all right, how do we reimagine our office? What have we learned? We've learned that we can do tasks really well remotely. So maybe we need less task space, but we know that what we're missing is collaboration, ideation, training, development and learning. Maybe we need more space for that. So this group has gone away. So I'll tell you, when they report back, we're trying to work on ourselves first to demonstrate to our customers, right, this is what we think the office of the future should look like. So that is definitely a work in progress. I mean, when we get 100% of people back in the office, maybe never. I think people do value the flexibility of doing task-based work at home in a much more productive environment. And certainly until we get the 4 metre rule lifted, you can't have more than 50% of people in the tenancy anyway. So maybe never is the answer to that.
Wow.
But actually, so let me add to that even before COVID, 75% of Mirvac people had flexible working arrangement. That we'd already been down that journey of work is what you do, not where you are. It's about impact and contribution, not about being present in a physical location. So we were already 75% there, which made it really easy. On the 13th of March, I will never forget the day, we were one of the first Australian corporates. 1 minute we were talking about having 1 floor a week, stay home, and the next minute we said, no, everybody out. If you can, go home. And by Monday morning, everybody was up and running. And I'm embarrassed to tell you this story, but I have to tell you, we were just about to launch Microsoft Teams. So we'd done a couple of pilots and we were just about to hire, this is sounding really silly now, a change manager who was going to help us over 6 months to implement Microsoft Teams. We didn't get time for that. Friday, made the decision. Monday, everybody has Microsoft Teams. We threw it out there. We said, have a go. Done. Job done. A great example of how you can change when people see a burning need, they will change very swiftly. So it's maybe not a huge departure from where we were before.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how quickly everyone's had to adapt.
Yeah.
One of the areas that is really challenged at the moment, and this is an area that Salman's very close to, is CBD retail. I mean, what's your view on that? And do you think it can bounce back and all these vacancies can be addressed?
Yeah, that is really related to the number of people in offices. That's the population that serves that. So really tough, and we see it in our CBD retail assets. So it contrasts that to Orion in Queensland, in southeast Queensland, is trading probably 10% up on this time last year. But Met Centre, Harbourside, Greenwood Plaza, we're down at 40% foot traffic where we were before. And until we get, hello, who's joined us? What's your name?
What's your name?
Emmy.
Hello, nice to see you. Until we get people back, there's just not enough demand for those routes. So that's going to struggle for a while, I think.
If you were mayor of Melbourne or Sydney CBDs, what would you be doing to future-proof the retail in these CBDs?
Well, thankfully, I'm not the mayor of either, because I think that's a very hard job. Yep, both Clover and Sally do a phenomenal job for their cities. I think it's really about the vibrancy of people wanting to be together and to enjoy all the amenity that having a large collection of people allows you to provide. And I think transport, all of the surveys we do, and I think this correlates with what you hear from the City of Melbourne and the City of Sydney, that it is, if you could teleport into the office, people will be very willing to go. They feel safe in their office. They don't feel safe on the train or the bus. And that is, I think, one of the real bottlenecks. So it's maybe not up to the mayors, maybe it's the mayors in collaboration with transport departments solving that riddle, which would allow people to feel safe on their way into the office.
Yeah, I agree. We obviously, you've had this great career and have done some really incredible things. And what's your advice to young people starting out? What would be, is there one piece of advice you can give to young people?
Oh, I so feel for young people. I watch. My daughter went to college in the US in September. By March, she's back in her bedroom. And it's so tough for people starting out either at university careers or just graduated, because all of the things that we got as young people in the workplace are more challenging. So I would say hang in there. This will pass. It's a great saying that mothers often pass around amongst each other. This too shall pass when you're going through the stages. And this too shall pass. So hang in. And I often say to our team, and particularly our Melbourne team at the moment, with people struggling again with homeschooling, that good enough is good enough right now. Don't be too hard on yourself. Good enough is good enough. One foot in front of the other, left, right, breathe. That's good enough. And I think that's what I tell my daughter, and that's what I would tell our young people as well.
If Nerida and I were to invest $100,000 with you right now, and what would you be doing with that investment on a 3-year basis?
So probably you would find your investment would be working its way into build to rent or industrial, is where the capital will be going on the margin. That's where that marginal dollar will be going. And I think you'd see some very nice returns out of that. But that's not investment advice because I'm not allowed to.
No, that's clear. On a personal note, if I can ask you, what was the most enjoyable part of this entire ISO experience? And were there any TV series that stood out for you during ISO?
Yes. So I really enjoyed cooking. So my husband and I did the Sydney Seafood School virtual cooking lessons, where you go to a supermarket and you pick up your Sydney seafood pack, and it's got all the ingredients and the recipe. And we've done that a few times on Friday night. I've enjoyed trying different things from cooking. I'm a terrible baker. It's absolutely terrible. I follow the instructions and my cakes don't rise, but I've mastered brownies. So that I really enjoyed that. I love spending more time with my kids. When they were home from school, I've got 2 boys. One just actually finished his leavers assembly at school yesterday, which we couldn't go to. So it was live streamed, had a little tear at the end of that. But when they were both home, I would try and schedule breaks at recess and lunch so that I could go and kick a football around with them. And I really enjoyed that. And strangely, this is so not my character, the show that I got obsessed by was Better Call Saul, which is a prequel series to Breaking Bad. And he is a hustler, and he's got a heart of gold, but he's a total hustler of a lawyer. And but I'm not advocating that type of behavior, because it wouldn't accord with who I am or what I think it was just endlessly entertaining, twists everywhere, and addictive. I loved it.
A nice break from reality.
Yeah.
Just a final question, Susan. What would you see as the biggest opportunity coming out of this crisis?
I think what we were talking about at the beginning of the different way of having a discourse between all parts of our society, community, government, corporate Australia, small, medium enterprises, large corporations. That level of cooperation and dialogue is something I've never, ever seen, and I would hate to lose it as we go into the future. So I think that is the real opportunity. And at a more macro level, I see a real opportunity for Australia. If we can get this right, if we can work out a way to bring immigrants and students in safely, like we used to do in the olden days. That's why there's a quarantine station in Manly. If we can work out a way to do that safely, where else in the world would people want to go? I'll include New Zealand in that, because they've also done a fabulous job. So I think that there is a real opportunity for Australia to take a leadership position in the recovery world, because there is a lot more pain in a lot of other places.
Yeah, I mean, Australia is such a great place to be. I think we're all feeling very lucky that we're here at the moment. Susan, thank you for your time today. It was just such a delight to speak to you, and really just to hear some of the great things Mirvac are doing, and also your favourite TV show. I found it very
thank you. Thank you very much. I'd love to meet your daughters as well.
Goodbye.
Thank you.